than in containers with liquid. Sometimes they're in nursery settings where they seem to be hybrid toddlers. And then there are the cloning rooms. Rooms where fully formed, fully human, but inert bodies are stored. Sometimes in coffin-like boxes, sometimes with stored in upright cylinder containers. And they are sometimes identical, like 20 identical female bodies, 20 identical male bodies. And sometimes their bodies are identical to the abductee who is being shown this. In fact, in this book, 3 of the women were shown clones of their bodies. And what explanations were given for these clones? Well, Pat, remember the one where Jesus beamed in and said, "They're with me"? Pat was told when she was shown her clone body that it was for the resurrection. Well, haven't you read your Bible? They're going to have a new body at the day of resurrection, and we're the ones in charge of making them. Here's yours. You're safe. You got a resurrection body. Lisa, on the other hand, shown her cloned body, was told that it would be used to replace her if she did not cooperate in what they wanted her to do, and nobody would ever know the difference. Which story are we going to buy? Can we buy either story? Have we ever been told the truth on any of this so far? Well, when the stories conflict this much, we have a question with how much truth there may be to this. Well, I know we're running out of time. I was going to talk about the external effects, the peripheral effects in the home, which that's all outlined here in the comparative chart. The after effects, I think, are important. What do people report as the after effects? Sleep disorder, stress, post-traumatic stress symptoms, fear of talking about their experiences. In fact, many people experience physical pain when they try to talk about these experiences, and the pain doesn't come from any real body symptom. It comes from a triggering device, either through implant or through suggestion. Shifts in attitudes. People's attitudes change radically. They become more ecologically aware. They become more compassionate. They become more non-traditional in their spiritual and religious views. And many, many times, as Jane, one of the abductees in here, had to say, they foster a mistrust of our government within us. Maybe we ought to be mistrustful, but they certainly work to make us so in many cases. They often become convinced they have a mission to perform. Thank you. They're given certain kinds of dreams. Most notably, 3 different kinds of dreams are reported over and over again. One dream I call from one abductee's report, the night of lights. And then some of you may have had this dream when the sky is literally filled with UFOs, and it's when they're coming now. This dream is very, very, very common among abductees. The second kind of dream, earthly disasters, great floods, great earthquakes, great cataclysm in which the abductees have a job to do, reported over and over again. And the third kind of dream reported frequently is that of a prophetic event. And many, many times abductees dream about certain events that actually do come to pass. Very often they're disaster events. Gynecological problems we've already talked about. Sexual dysfunction is a very common after effect of this. Marital problems rife after this happens. I can't tell you how many abductees in the last 2 years have gone through divorces when they were happily married before. It is extraordinary the kind of stress on the relationships these people experience as after effects. Degradation. Now, as many people who realize a spiritual awakening and uprising from the experience, we got the other side where they go through the degradation of their personal lives, as we talked about with the drug abuse, the promiscuity, the self-destructive behavior, the suicidal tendencies. What do we know about human involvement from these reports? Of these 8 women, 4 have been abducted and interrogated by military human personnel. They want to know what's going on just like you and I do, but they're using better technology to try to get their information than you or I have. We have military personnel, medical personnel, scientific research personnel, very, very often working with aliens on board craft or in the facilities. We see an increase in helicopter activity over the homes of abductees when they begin dealing with this or having current situations. We get the phone surveillance, we get the mail surveillance, we get people followed, we get people with taps on their wires, people whose homes are broken into and the only thing taken is UFO-related documents, etc. And then, of course, the interrogations like Pat's family went through in 1954 and my husband went through in 1988, and 4 of the women in this book have experienced on military-based facilities at the hands of military personnel. So that's what you're going to find spelled out in much greater detail than I can go into in 20 minutes here in Taken. And I hope you'll have a chance to look at that at some point. The book that will be out next month is called Masquerade of Angels. Barbara and I have been working on this for a couple of years now, and it's an ongoing research project. This involves Ted Rice, a man who was born in Alabama, who was born to a very ordinary family. He was a rural cotton patch kid. He grew up in the cotton patch farm area of northern Alabama. But from a very early age, he began to have a series of extremely paranormal events. Before he was even in school, these go back and we go through, in Masquerade of Angels, we go through very thoroughly documented instances of paranormal events in his life. And these things led him, molded the journey he went on in his life, and brought him to where he was a psychic worker, a light worker, if you will, trying through his psychic talents to lead people to understand there's more to this world than we think, that when you die it's not the end, that we get communications from the dead who've gone on to the other side, and here's proof. I can give you proof through my psychic readings, and Ted did this for 20 years very happily, very successfully, and believing that he was being guided by spirits with God's blessing to do this work. Now, in 1989, something happened. Ted was in Shreveport, Louisiana at this time, and suddenly he started having experiences that weren't like the old spirit guide contacts he'd been having all these years. In fact, instead of getting communications when he was in a awake state with a transmission for you or whoever he was doing a reading for, Ted began to have things coming into the house at night, touching his body, making him very nervous and upset and fearful. Little lights of balls of light coming in and floating through the house like probes. Then he began to have communications that he couldn't remember when he would wake up. And the spirits had never worked like this with Ted. When they had a message, they made it clear and he delivered it. All of a sudden, he's getting information put into his brain, and when he wakes up, he can't retrieve it. And this is wrecking the poor man's health. If night after night you were being awakened, being touched, being probed, being prodded, being talked to, and then had to get up at 7:30 and go to work, you begin to go downhill. Your health declines, your mental acuity declines, your ability to work declines, and he was finding himself on the edge of a nervous breakdown from this repeated nightly intrusion activity, unlike anything the spirit guides had ever done to this man before. And he finally reached a point of exploding. I mean, he couldn't take this anymore. He even moved. He was in a trailer at the time, in a very nice trailer park in Shreveport. And he thought, well, maybe if he moved to a different spot, this would leave him alone. So he moved his trailer. And he set up his trailer, but he was still afraid to stay alone because of all this activity that had been going on and how freaked out he was by it. And he asked a friend to stay with him for a few days after they moved in. This was 4 nights to make this move and set up everything. And after they finally got it settled, they were just about to relax and sit down, watch a little TV, and get ready for going to bed that night, when all of a sudden here comes the little blue probe light again. And this time, after he's gone to all the trouble to move and get away from it, Ted lost his temper. He was tired, he was on the edge of breaking up, and here comes this thing again, and he finally screams out, "I've had enough. You've got to leave me alone. How do you expect me to do my spiritual work when you won't let me get my rest? You keep me up night after night. I'm drained. How can I concentrate? How can I do psychic readings? If you guys don't leave me alone, I'm going to quit doing this work." He said, "Give me a break. For God's sake, go pick on the neighbors for a change and leave me alone." And lo and behold, in the middle of the night, Ted was waken up, abducted out of the house by entities that he had never seen before, taken to a field near the trailer park where he sees other little alien creatures bringing his neighbors. And they gather the neighbors on board the craft and say, "Is this satisfactory?" At that point, Ted blacks out. When he comes to, he's being delivered via the craft back to the neighborhood, and they're dropping off all the neighbors one by one at their house, and Ted is the last one. And he gets up the next day and says to his friend who's had staying with him because he's been too nervous to stay alone, "You won't believe what happened to me last night." And of course, the man didn't believe him. Now, they had just moved into this area. He had not met any of the neighbors. He said, I would think, you know, these beings came in and took me to a spaceship. He said, I think over there past those woods is where they took me to. And the guy said, nah, there's nothing but woods over there. There's nowhere for a UFO to land. And Ted said, yes, there is. I've been there last night. Let's go look. And his friend agrees to go with him, but there comes a sudden downpour. I mean, a downpour. If you've ever been in Louisiana, that's where it knows how to rain. And it was several days before it was dry enough for Ted and his friend to go through the woods and see if there was this place that Ted remembered from his event. And sure enough, there it was. A large field. Now, they didn't see any UFO traces, so they said, maybe it was just a dream. That week, for sale signs began to go up all up and down Ted's street. And within a matter of a very short time, all but 2 of the original neighbors were gone. Now, he had assumed this was only a dream, so he didn't pursue it. Several months later, he gets to know some of the neighbors by then, and he's chatting with some, and there's a couple who are still part of the original, the only 2 others who were left from the original night, and they're chatting, and one of his friends says, hey, Unsolved Mysteries is coming on. They're going to talk about UFOs. Remember that dream you had? You want to come hear this? Ted says, yeah. And he invites the neighbors who have 2 little young children in to watch it with him. They watch it. The neighbors get up to leave, and as they're leaving, the woman says, you know, that reminds me. Several months ago, my little daughter told me about the night the spacemen came and took her and everybody in the neighborhood for a ride. And Ted said, can I talk to the little girl? Can I hear from her? And they brought the little girl in, and she recounted the story. And then they remembered that a relative had been visiting that weekend, a teenager sleeping on the couch in the living room. And she said, yeah. And that was the same weekend my cousin said, what were all those little kids doing in the house last night, and where'd that blue light come from? So began the investigation into Ted's non-spiritual, non-spirit guide abduction events. And what came out of this investigation that has gone on now for over 2 years will literally blow the top off of the metaphysical view of the alien agenda. And I exhort you to read it. If somebody will give me a grant, I'll give you the books for free. I think it's that important that you read what we have discovered about what goes on with this agenda, what they're doing with the black box, what they're doing with the cloning, and what they're doing with our souls. And I mean our souls. And I think we're going to find out that we have never yet fully understood what this soul energy is all about. And we're in for a surprise when we find out what can be done with the manipulation of our soul energy by these beings and why they may be doing it. And of course, since I do hope you'll look at the book, and I only have 2 minutes left before we go to question and answer, I cannot go into all of the details. I don't mean to be a tease, but this is a story that would take a week to tell you. But I'll tell you, it starts with one of the New Age prime stars and takes you on a journey that's going to turn you 180 degrees around on what you think is going on with these spirits, these aliens, and this masquerade of angels that so many of us, with our good hearts and our good love, have accepted at face value. And my message to you is nothing at face value. They can deceive, they can use illusion, they can control how you respond, what you see, what you feel, and what you remember. And if you're going to take any of it at face value, I got a bridge I want to sell you. And I thank you, and I'll be happy to take questions and answers at this point. Pardon? Yes, several implants have been removed from various people. I know one person's was tested and found to be an unusual mix of a silicon substance, unidentified. Daryl Sims down in Houston with the Houston UFO Network has collected several implants that are being tested. So far, none of them have been positively identified. What we find with a lot of these artifacts is that, yes, they get tested, and the results tell us what they're not, but they don't tell us what they are. And very often it's made out of very mundane material. But if you're working with terrestrial creatures, you pretty much probably want to use terrestrial materials for dealing with them. That seems to make some sense to me. Sometimes these little, like Barbara showed you, did you show the little hip implant, little bead type thing with the wires. Very often they look like that, a small cylinder with little wires coming out. Some of the ones into the ear, like Amy in here, had two symptoms. Fear of talking about their experiences. In fact, many people experience physical pain when they try to talk about these experiences. And the pain doesn't come from any real body symptom. It comes from a triggering device, either through implant or through suggestion. Shifts in attitudes. People's attitudes change radically. They become more ecologically aware. They become more compassionate. They become more non-traditional in their spiritual and religious views. And many, many times, as Jane, one of the abductees in here, had to say, they foster a mistrust of our government, not cooperate in what they wanted her to do, and nobody would ever know the difference. Which story are we going to buy? Can we buy either story? Have we ever been told the truth on any of this so far? Well, when the stories conflict this much, we have a question with how much truth there may be to this. Well, I know we're running out of time. I was going to talk about the external effects, the peripheral effects in the home, which that's all outlined here in the comparative chart. The after effects, I think, are important. What do people report as the after effects? Sleep disorder, stress, post-traumatic stress on this. In fact, in this book, 3 of the women were shown clones of their bodies. And what explanations were given for these clones? Well, Pat, remember the one where Jesus beamed in and said, "They're with me"? Pat was told when she was shown her clone body that it was for the resurrection. Well, haven't you read your Bible? They're going to have a new body at the day of resurrection, and we're the ones in charge of making them. Here is yours. You're safe. You got a resurrection body. Lisa, on the other hand, shown her cloned body, was told that it would be used to replace her if she didn't have been in containers with liquid. Sometimes they're in nursery settings where they seem to be hybrid toddlers. And then there are the cloning rooms. Rooms where fully formed, fully human, but inert bodies are stored. Sometimes in coffin-like boxes, sometimes with stored in upright cylinder containers. And they are sometimes identical, like 20 identical female bodies, 20 identical male bodies. And sometimes their bodies are identical to the abductee who is being shown within us. Maybe we ought to be mistrustful, but they certainly work to make us so in many cases. They often become convinced they have a mission to perform. Thank you. They're given certain kinds of dreams. Most notably, 3 different kinds of dreams are reported over and over again. One dream I call from one abductee's report, the night of lights, and that some of you may have had this dream when the sky is literally filled with UFOs, and it's when they're coming now. This dream is very, very, very common among abductees. The second kind of dream, earthly disasters, great floods, great